not the fastest bike that I own, it's not the coolest descender I own, and it's certainly not the most brutal gravel bike, and it ain't win any beauty prizes compared to some of my other bikes. However, this may be the best value for money purchase I have ever made in the biking space.
It's not a trick.
So today I'm doing something a little different, and I'm looking at a much more entry-level model bike. A bike that anyone who's into cycling can afford to buy and enjoy. And so I found this, the Marin Gestalt Beyond Road Bike, which is an entry-level road/light gravel bike that's priced really, really affordably. Now this came in at just around $1,000 New Zealand dollars on special, which is about 600 USD. That is a really good price to pay for, honestly, what is a pretty well put together bike. Now Marin positions this as a beyond road, which, I don't know guys, like, pick a lane. Either it's road or it's gravel, but I guess I can't judge them too much. It's got features you don't normally see on a road bike, like larger spacings for tyres and the ability to take up to a 45C tyre. The frame is fully aluminium, including the fork. One annoyance is it only has one mounting point on the fork, intended for fenders, but if you're bike packing, you could certainly clamp something onto it, given that it is aluminium. There's other trade-offs of the price point too, like cable pull disc brakes, as well as the Claris 2x8 Groupset. You also get quick release skewers on your wheels rather than through axle.
It does actually come with some cheap basic platform pedals, which I think is great because so often entry-level bikes don't include anything, and first-time riders who are buying maybe more entry-level bikes don't necessarily expect to have to fork out for pedals as well.
I've equipped mine with some Raceworks AliExpress SPD pedals. These seem to work quite nicely. Another feature you don't often find on road bikes is it's got the mount points for a rack, which is fantastic if you want to turn it into a tourer or a commuter bike. Pretty much any off-the-shelf cheap rack will happily fit this. No need for some sort of fancy carbon fibre clamping tail fin system. There's also plenty of attachment points for fenders, so if you want to do wet weather riding and not kick up tons of water everywhere, you can install some, at the cost of reduced tyre clearance, of course. I know what you're thinking, hey Jeffro, you don't need a starter bike, so why the heck have you bought this? Well, I don't need a starter bike, but what I do need is a bike that I can take travelling with me overseas that I can tolerate the risk. My nicer bikes cost 3 to 5 times as much as this, and I can't easily get insurance for them. I have to then travel with a huge carry case, which is a real hassle, not to mention the cost between 500 to 1,500 USD for a good one. And so I've bought this, which is comparatively cheap, and I guess I'm mentally resigned to the fact that it's going to get beat up. And by being resigned to that fact is actually quite liberating, because now I'm going to fly with a bike in one of these, a soft bag, Tyres bag, with some additional cardboard padding and bubble wrap for a good enough protection that I can fold down and ride with at the other end. The other option, of course, is using any standard cardboard bicycle box like the one it came in, which you can dispose of at the other end at the airport. It's going to get scratches and then get dings. So the whole point is have a bike that's designed to, I guess, get a patina of travel upon it, but still good enough to do everything I need. That means having decent brakes, having a reasonable group set, having the ability to ride at a reasonable pace on the road, as well as the ability to ride off-road as well. And I think Marin Gestalt ticks all of those boxes. But I also think it ticks the box of being a really good buy if you're after your first road or gravel bike. So why do I think that? Well, let's take it on a bit of a ride and see how it performs. The first thing I'll note about it is it feels quite comfortable and quite stable on the road. It's got a really good riding position. I'm able to hit some pretty good speeds. And you know what? I didn't hit a Strava personal record, but I came pretty consistent with my average. Taking a step back to admire it, it's actually a pretty good looking bike. I've seen cheaper bikes that look cheap. This looks like a more premium bike. It's only when you start really analysing components do you recognise that it's a little bit of a lower price point. One thing you can't get around with, of course, any lower price bike is weight. Now, I think weight weenies are a little bit above and beyond with trying to save every last gram, but you can't deny that the kilos do add up. And this bike comes in at around 12 kilos, which is definitely a little bit heavier, certainly compared to like my entry-level carbon being about 8 kilos. You notice the difference in particular when you're accelerating from stationary, just an extra bit of weight to push along, and of course on hill climbs it adds up, but here's the thing, it's not that much heavier than my regular bike I use for commuting. You know, and on the flat, once you're at speed, it's not really a big imposition.
Look, overall it rides really well for a bike that only costs, 600 US. I do spend more time going to my front chainring than I would like, but it's a small price to pay.
So let's talk about the Claris 2x8 group set this bike comes with.
On the front, you've got a 50-34, and on the rear, an 11-32. Now, this is basically what's on my 105 mechanically shifted road bike. So you've got essentially the same range as a decent quality road bike, but you don't have all the same intermediary steps with the gears, as that means I'm often shifting up and down on the front derailleur, which I don't normally have to do that much. And one of the interesting things with the Claris is I have to spend a lot more time trimming
than I do on my 2x105. I'll show you what I mean. You can hear the chain scraping. But trim, no noise. Untrim, noise.
If I had to guess, it's probably due to how big the 8-speed chains are compared to the more modern, higher end 11, 12 and 13 chains. But it's not that big a deal. You get used to it pretty quickly. You just have to sort of remember, hey, you quickly go through half your cassette very fast when they're such a small number, and to trim appropriately or shift up or shift down on the front is required.
But is 2x8 enough for climbing? Well,
It's completely adequate on a hill. Could be nicer if add one easier rear gear.
yeah, just to make it that much more attractive for a new rider who maybe doesn't have the same fitness and strength as a true, tried and true roadie. And it would also really add to the versatility for adventure touring. Shifting wise, it's pretty good. Look, it's no Di2, but I hit the button, it shifts reliably, and I can shift through the cassette pretty quickly as well. What goes up must come down, so let's check out the braking performance. Well, it's a little bit squeaky, but it's probably just it feeding in a bit still. In terms of braking performance, it's pretty adequate. Far better than any rim bikes. Not as good as hydraulic disc, but it's hard to get affordable hydraulic disc road bikes. For whatever reason, mountain biking is dirt cheap, but on road it's actually really expensive. There is also a bonus to this as well, which some tourers swear by cable pull disc because they can be repaired in the field with a guy with some number 8 wire, whereas hydraulics require a bleeding kit and the appropriate fluid. Now, I've never had problems with hydraulics, so I don't really consider this that big a deal. Only issue I do have with them, really, is the clamping force required. There's a lot more force required on your hands for cable pull disc than there is for hydraulic. It's not so bad in the drops, but when you ride on the hoods, it's much more noticeable, and I could see someone potentially developing hand cramping issues with a large amount of riding. Now, brakes are all well and good, but you need some decent rubber to actually connect you to the road. And what have we got?
something called a
Xylent.
and I have no idea what brand of tyre that is or where it came from. My guess is it's a pretty cheap tyre to save some money, but it's not too terrible. This is a 35C tyre, and you can sort of see it's got kind of an all-terrain tread. It's got a little bit of a smoother rolling piece in the middle, as well as these sort of jagged edges for gravel or other unstable terrain. I gave it a quick test around the roads. I've given it a quick ride on some like road gravel, like car drivable. Works quite fine, no issues there. I wouldn't take it on any single track or any like gnarly terrain, but in theory, with the clearance that this has, might be able to fit up to a 45C on this. Now, I'm going to give it a go with some 43C Panaracer tyres that are coming, so I'll report back on how they look. And yeah, that should give it a little bit more cushion and grip.
Hey, it's Future Jeffrey here. I just fitted these Panaracer 43Cs and they fit perfectly. Without fenders, there's definitely enough clearance in here to fit a 45C. Two things to note with the tyre change: the rims are tubeless ready, but the Xylent tyres this came with are the thickest, hardest tyres I've ever had to remove. Possibly it makes them good for touring, but you can save a lot of weight by swapping a TPU or tubeless and putting a better quality tyre on your bike.
So is it actually a gravel bike, or is it just a upmarketed road bike? First thing to call out is you've got quite a wide set of bars, very well padded, and with the flares on the side. Now, it's not the most extreme flare, but it's definitely enough to give you a bit of extra confidence descending, whether on-road or off-road, and certainly gives you a wider base for steerage in an off-road situation. You know, sort of a very, very endurance gravel type
posture.
With the size of the large bars, the extra padding, and decent tyre size, it does hold its own in terms of vibration dampening.
Now I know what some of you are going to say. It's a gravel bike, it should have one by. Well, I love one by.
Got one bike on my mountain bike and one bike on the gravel bike.
I'm pretty good for climbing. You'll typically have like a dinner plate sized rear gear. However, what it often does poorly is speed on the road. And I wanted a bike that could try and do it all, be good on the road as well as good on gravel. And a one by just caps out on flat or high speed rides. So I went two by, which in some ways is good because it also meant I could buy a cheaper bike because two by not as attractive a prospect sometimes. Now it does come with a trade-off. There's no clutch on this particular rear derailleur, which means there's more risk of a chain bouncing around when riding. And so there is risk potentially of doing vigorous riding on gravel. Maybe I'll start dropping the chain more, but I won't really know until I see what happens. So it may not be that much of an issue. I mean, again, I'm not going to be doing unbound or anything on this bike. It's really just intended for giving the flexibility to fly somewhere and go for a gravel ride with a friend, not do anything too crazy.
And yes, it may not have the slick carbon, the colourful paint job, or the high-spec components, but you know what? It's a damn fine ride put together at an extremely sharp price point. The frame is well made, the paint job looks good, it shifts well, and it holds a respectable position on the road. Out of the box, perfect road, commuter bike, light rail trail type gravel, but some 40C plus gravel tyres, and you could take this on some pretty awesome off-road adventures as well. So what do you reckon? Goodbye? Or do you have something better to suggest? Let me know in the comments below what you'd recommend. Between the wind and the cat, I don't know how I get anything recorded.